Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com. This is the podcast where we share proven strategies and tactics so you can start growing your strength training business with confidence. This is episode 323. And the topic of this episode is how to learn from micro failures in your business. This will help you understand how to rifle shot better in your organization and test ideas with less risk, rifle shotting is another way of saying testing ideas with less risk, how to measure performance, how to manage your expectations, and also to realize not every successful business out there is plain sailing. This podcast is very much inspired by the podcast series I did with Dave Smith, PhD, on decision-making and cognitive biases. And thanks to James Fisher, really, for obviously suggesting to you, Luke, to do this podcast today on a micro failure you had in your business. Discover Strength for one of the most successful personal training businesses in the world. And like any great business, they're prepared to make mistakes to find out what works. But the thing is, you rarely hear about the failures from these great businesses. And so this is why I think this is really important. This podcast is really important today. And today's guest to share this story is Luke Carson, who's founder and CEO of Discover Strength. And Luke, I just want to say before we get started, thank you for being so gracious in sharing this with my audience, because again, not many people like talking about their failures.
Well, it's my pleasure always. And I don't know if we should thank or not thank James Fisher for messaging and saying, hey, Luke, you guys failed miserably at this. Why don't you come and talk about that? And my first response was, okay, thank you, James. And I think it's a great topic that wouldn't have been on my radar if it weren't for the combination of James reflecting on all of your content with Dave Smith, which I've listened to all of it. And I think it's fantastic. So thank you for that great series.
You're welcome. And thank you to Dave for helping me with it. And I love that about James. I love he never pulls any punches. He's very, very direct and isn't afraid to speak his mind. And I actually really like that trait about him. So let's kick off with just getting some background, some understanding. So you founded a micro studio, sort of at the tail end of the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of closures. Maybe that's timing's not right on that. But can you just talk about the idea behind the micro studio? What is a micro studio? Just to introduce the concept.
Yeah. So just to bring us up to speed on history. So we were closed down in March. Most of the world was closed down in the middle of March. All right. So that's when gyms and fitness and everything closed down. We were closed down where we live in Minnesota longer than most of the US. We did not open up until June 10th. I'm not going to get any sympathy from your Canadian listeners right now, but we opened up again June 10th. We had another shutdown the end of November through the end of December. So in 2020, we were closed down for about 4 months out of 2020. So in October, we opened up a micro studio. So we had spent, July and August deciding, do we want to do this? And so here's the idea. When we reopen studios, we're going to have a high percentage of our customers that are uncomfortable coming back to studio. Now, many of them are doing virtual personal training with us, which is great. A decent amount of them are not doing virtual personal training, and we'd love to find a way to serve them. So let's just pause for a second. The mindset when you're going through tumultuous times, when you're going through turbulent change in a business, the most important mindset is to start thinking about your consumer, to start thinking about the market, to start thinking about how you can use your differentiation, your strengths, and serve them. And by serve them, I mean provide value in a way where you can make money. How can you drive revenue? And so we had one thing going, which was virtual training. But we said, well, we could drive more revenue if we could get a micro studio open. And we just called it micro studio, probably because I heard that term on some of your podcasts. We wanted to open a tiny studio where we just have one client in the studio with one trainer. So the idea was it could be as COVID safe as possible. The trainer would still have a mask on, the client would have a mask on, one human in there. And we would do a 20-minute workout instead, a 15-minute workout instead of a 30-minute workout. And so we would be able to get more workouts in the day. That was the idea. I just said 15. It was 20 now. It was 20 minutes. I'm sorry. And we'll talk about how that evolved over time. It was 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes. Of course, we can get more sessions in, in a unit of time, in a 1 hour period. So I flew to Connecticut and found some used Nautilus Nitro machines that your listeners will be very familiar with. Bought them, got them all reconditioned. They are looking brand new. The only reason you would understand that they're not brand new is because you know that Nautilus Nitro hasn't been manufactured for some time. But I mean, pristine, new upholstery, new paint. They just look like $1 million. And it was a full line. Now, let's pause for a second, and you can interrupt me at any point, obviously, Lawrence, but we didn't know what we were going to do in terms of equipment. We thought about ARX. I still think that could have been a great solution. We thought about like a big 5 approach. Ultimately, what we decided to do was do a more robust set of equipment. So we did leg extension, leg curl, leg press. We did an assisted chin dip. We did a lateral raise, overhead press, pull over, pull down, pec fly, chest press. We did an abdominal. We did a Roman chair low back, a hammer strength Roman chair low back. We did a pendulum adjustable bench and some adjustable dumbbells. I don't think I missed anything there. So we had a lot of equipment. I mean, that's like a full studio. Our normal studio is about 2,000 square feet. The micro studio was just over 500 square feet. So it was tiny. So that's what it looked like. Price point, we just went a little bit less expensive than our normal sessions. We were actually driving more revenue per unit of time because it was a 20-minute workout instead of a 30-minute workout. Now, one of the things that's interesting is we can look at the micro studio as a matched pair design study. And this is what Jim Collins does in Good to Great and Built to Last, is what happens when two businesses start or they're competing against each other in the same industry, in the same climate, with the same, external environment. And what happens? We opened our St. Louis Park studio literally within 2 weeks of the micro studio. So now we have 2 studios opening at the exact same time in the same COVID conditions, in the same market. The micro studio is actually probably in a better, more affluent area, but they're really 10 minutes away from each other. So it makes kind of diving into understanding the failure that it was the micro studio more interesting. So maybe I should just say full stop there, and you can decide where you want to go from here.
No, I'm loving this, Luke. I just want you to keep going. So no, that was a great way of setting the scene. So no, just please continue in terms of like exploring, the results of that studio. Because you talked about kind of the why, the intent behind it, what it is. Obviously, you talked about a time scale. So really it's understanding the results you saw over what period of time compared to the other new location.
Yeah. So to be totally fair on this, I should probably, I'm going to bring up our scorecard so I can actually share exact numbers. But I also want to make a mention that when we talked about this as a team, we said the micro studio is going to be a rifle shot. And rifle shot comes from Jim Collins, and it's the idea that we've talked about it on your podcast before, but it's the idea that, picture you're in a marine time war, and you're in a large ship and you're getting close to your enemy ship or vessel, and you have, of course, a limited amount of gunpowder, and you don't want to use all the gunpowder on 1 or 2 cannonballs, because if you miss with that cannonball, you're done, right? You're out of ammo, you're out of gunpowder, powder, you're in trouble. And so the idea is don't use all that gunpowder on the cannonball, shoot a rifle shot, and then understand how close are we to the enemy ship? Does it ping off the side of the boat? Is it 30 degrees to the east or to the west? And once you've calibrated and you understand where you are, and you've actually pinged the side of the enemy ship with the rifle, then you put all of the gunpowder and fire the cannon, right? That's the idea. So that's the analogy. The criteria of a rifle shot is you should be able to fail and fail fast and fail without losing too much money and disrupting the entire business. So a rifle shot is probably really a tool around innovation. Try something, fail, try something, succeed, and then you can decide, do we want to roll it out? So a rifle shot is essentially a test. do you want to do something on a bigger scale? So for us, we needed to understand, does this work, this one location? If we fail, we don't lose too much money, we can recover and we can move on. The other reason it was a rifle shot is we didn't know if this was going to be permanent. We didn't know if we'd continue to keep this small studio open after COVID times. We could find out that it's a wild success and we need to keep running with it. We just didn't know. So is that sufficient kind of background?
Yeah, could you elaborate? Because I remember you saying about the I don't know if you've mentioned this, but in terms of like the decisions you made in order to cap the downside. So you got a very short-term lease. Can you just elaborate on the commitments you made to really cap the downside? Because I think those details are really fascinating.
Yeah, we signed a 1-year lease, inexpensive space. We didn't put money into the build out. We put a beautiful floor in. They cut a skylight, so we had no windows in the space. We had like a window above now, so we had some natural light. We put a sign, a Discover Strength sign in the interior, fresh paint, but it wasn't the sign that's as expensive as our normal sign. So it was branded a Discover Strength, but not like our normal studios. So the studio itself was not as impressive, but we didn't want to put a ton of money into it. And
you had a limited budget that you set out from the outset, like this
exactly.
is the maximum budget.
Exactly.
Because we can afford to lose this.
And your listeners know this better than anybody. We probably could have done this with less equipment. We didn't need that much equipment, but they were selling that entire line, and I thought we can buy the entire line. And then, of course, my mindset was, if this fails, we're not going to throw the equipment away. We could sell the equipment. We could use it in a different studio that we would open up later. We could put 1 or 2 of these machines in a number of our different studios. I could buy a house with a big garage and put all the equipment there and train there. So there's other options, right? So that was our idea, that we could fail and survive all of it.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So does it make sense now in terms of the chronology of this to now get into what started happening? What did you experience? So you set it up, right? And then what did you do in terms of promotion, all of that?
Yeah. So we did all of the promotion that we would do with our other studios, but we just messaged it that it's completely COVID safe. Right. So we had all of these email lists and drip campaigns to people that hadn't been back to studio. They were going to get direct targeted marketing around it. I think that was the big focus. You haven't been back to studio. You don't feel safe coming back to studio. Here's all the info about our micro studio. And then let's be really clear on this. The location of the micro studio was incredibly central to our other 6 studios. So if you're looking at the geography of the Twin Cities, that micro studio is right in the middle of where all of our other locations were. So if you were a customer that had previously gone to one of our other studios and you didn't feel comfortable going back to studio, it was not a long drive for you to get to our micro studio. Every one of our other locations, that customer probably could have got to our micro studio in 8 to 12 minutes at most in terms of drive.
What's the parking like?
Parking, ample parking, no problem. It was also COVID time, so no one was going into office. But you can drive to our micro studio right now, and there's open parking, just wide open parking.
So what was the hope that all of the clients who had declined coming to normal studio or doing virtual, or a large percentage of those would attend, and then what you would potentially drive some more clients into that through word of mouth and referral as well?
Exactly. We wanted to serve our own customers to drive revenue, and then we wanted to be able to message that, hey, this is the safest place to basically exercise in the Twin Cities right now. Because in the thick of COVID, the other options, the other fitness studios and boutiques and health clubs, people just were not excited about sweating and running on a treadmill next to somebody else. And people still wanted to exercise. So if you had never heard of Discover Strength and now you heard about this micro concept, or I should just say a very private concept, you'd be interested in it. So, let me just circle back and make an emphasis on this. We wanted our customers to know that we were spending all of our mental energy finding ways to serve them, right? We weren't saying, this is Discover Strength, this is the model. It's our current studios, our current workouts, and when COVID subsides, we'll get back to normal. It's our job to continue to innovate and find ways to serve them. So and I don't want to give us too much credit, we only came up with 2 things. One was virtual and one was the micro, but we were not going to rest, right? Like, we had time on our hands. Our leadership team sat down and said, we have to find ways to serve our customer. Now, there's plenty of other things that we thought about and we talked about that we didn't think were viable or good ideas. the two that we really landed on were virtual and the micro studio. And I can say now, and we'll get into the numbers if you're ready to get into the numbers now, we can say virtual was a massive success, right? And micro was not a success. And I would have not been able to predict that at all. Today, we still have 21% of our business as virtual. Our NPS feedback on virtual is incredible. We have customers that have never come back to studio because they say, I just like virtual and it's convenient. I don't ever need to come back. I'm not worried about COVID. It's just easy for me to train at home. We have some trainers that 90% of what they do is virtual. And my prediction would have been micro was going to be just a smash success. Now, let's be clear. I'm really into the micro studio. I have done about 40% of my workouts since November at that micro studio. I like the equipment. We have a converging pec fly there that I love. I think you give me 2 more months on it and my pec development is going to rival James Fisher's. I mean, I love the equipment there. I feel like we have everything that almost everything that you need. I just am emotional about some of my workouts there. So I like that setup.
And it's still live now, right? It's still,
yeah,
you still have
live.
it.
But we'll get into the future of that here in just a little bit. So I think we should, if you're okay with it, Lawrence, I'd love to just jump to the scorecard and talk about some numbers.
Let's just park that for 1 second. I just want to ask, because I want to almost build up why didn't this work out, right? And so one of the other questions I had is in terms of the workout protocol, the 20 minutes. I mean, you can still do a fair amount of work there. I mean, maybe perhaps it wasn't quite as extensive or comprehensive as your normal 30-minute session. So what were the workouts looking like in that 20-minute slot? Exactly.
Right. Great question. 30-minute workout for us is 10 to 11 exercises. Generally 4 leg, 4 to 5 upper body, 2 midsection. For the micro, the 20 minutes we were aiming for 7 exercises, which do the math, it's very doable to do 7 exercises. So maybe it was 3 leg, 3 upper body, 1 midsection, but between the couple routines we were going to design for you, we were still going to be pretty comprehensive, right? We're going to cover it all. If someone was a little bit slower or the protocol had more time under tension, we were fine with 6 exercises in a particular workout. We had a couple clients purchase back-to-back 20-minute workouts because they just wanted to be in there for 40 minutes and have just a longer, more leisurely workout. And we were okay with that. Not a lot of people, but a few people did that, and we allowed that. And then we just designed a workout that was a little bit longer, maybe 12 exercises. So we were not too far off. So maybe right now we should pause and say, I think this was mistake number 1. And again, when you connect the dots after the fact, there's a lot of biases involved in your thinking. And we can have Dave Smith do a recap of this podcast and point out all my biases.
That would be fun.
But I think that one of the mistakes we made is when we launched the micro studio, we went 20 minutes. Our Discover Strength clients were so used to 30 minutes. All we've talked about for 15 years is 30 minutes. And 20 minutes to them, this is my assumption, just sounded like it wasn't going to be comprehensive enough. And so when we talked about the time, 20 minutes was a no-brainer. All of our colleagues do 20 minutes, right? Lawrence, everyone in your podcast does 20 minutes. Wonderful companies like The Perfect Workout do 20 minutes. And I thought, guys, 20 minutes, the only reason our clients like 30 minutes is that's all they've known. If we would have started with 20 minutes, they would have thought 30 minutes was superfluous and 20 minutes is the way to do it. It's just a matter of changing what they're used to. So I think maybe message number 1 or learning number 1, it was hard to change what our customer was used to. Now, again, maybe some assumptions going into what I said, maybe poor marketing of the message, but they were not on board with 20 minutes versus 30. So let me pause there and say a few months ago, we changed it to 30 minutes. So we started to try to iterate and say, how do we make the micro studio work? So I'll just jump ahead and say 2 things that we did is we no longer called it micro studio. We called it Edina, because that's where the city is. It's Edina. And so we don't need to call it micro. Micro maybe sounded like it was a lesser version of a studio or as a compromised workout.
Or maybe it made the person feel more claustrophobic. And with the pandemic, maybe that was
potentially. Yeah, potentially.
Your NPS might speak to this, but maybe I'm sure you've got so much more to say on this. But
yeah, I mean, the NPS never actually spoke to the facility feels too small, but I think we couldn't get people to try it. Once they tried it, they liked it, but we couldn't get people to try it. And I think it was because they thought, I'm not into 20 minutes. I don't know what micro is, but I'm not in the micro. I want the full experience. So we changed it to Edina and we changed it to 30 minutes. And we thought, all right, that's the ticket. Okay. Because, and by the way, Edina is the most affluent community, the most affluent city in all of Minnesota. Every year for the last 30 years, Edina is one of the top 5 most affluent cities in the United States. I mean, it's a step off of Beverly Hills. It's a wonderful area. And so I thought, all right, now that we go to 30 minutes and we call it Edina, this place is going to explode. And it did not. Right? We didn't grow at all. We changed leadership. We changed who was growing it. We changed who focused on it, and we didn't move the needle at all. And I should take a step back here. Our strategy for the launch, I shouldn't say strategy, our tactics for the launch was we were going to take our most popular veteran trainers at all of our locations, and they were all going to take one shift at the micro studio. So we weren't going to put a full staff there. We were going to take our all-stars from each location, and they were all going to take a shift. And I mean everyone. I took a shift, David took a shift, and then our iconic trainers that have been with us forever, where if they're going to go work at the Edina studio, their clients are going to follow them. Lawrence, I would have bet almost everything I owned that was the right tactic. It failed miserably. I mean, their schedules were totally open. No one followed them there. So talk about learnings. I would have thought 8 months ago, I would have told you a great trainer, the client will follow them anywhere at Discover Strength. And that is just was not the case at all with the micro studio. We had these wonderful trainers who their schedules are packed every second of the day. And then they're in the micro studio sitting by themselves with no clients. Now, of course, that made our trainer pretty upset because they weren't making as much money and they weren't full. And it baffled us, right? So I've probably got into 2 learnings right now. That's the second learning, is that people just did not follow the trainer to the micro studio. And I don't want to try to, go ahead. I was going to say, I don't want to try to dissect why they didn't follow them. They just didn't. We can speculate that the drive time and the parking, or they didn't like the equipment, or they just didn't. We thought they would follow them anywhere. And we've kind of seen that before. We just have a wonderful trainer right now moving from our Northeast Minneapolis location to our St. Louis Park location. And literally 80% of the clients that trainer works with is following them to this other location, which is, I mean, that's what I thought would have happened with the micro. It did not.
Yeah, I love your point, by the way, about having Dave do like a debrief of this and seeing both how you and I have our cognitive biases at play, because what I was about to say to you, is it easy to get to? And again, it's me trying to understand like cause and effect, which might be impossible. But was it easy to get to in Edina? The location?
Very easy to. Yeah. Located off of a major thoroughfare that everyone travels up and down, Highway 100. From the time you get off the highway to the time you're in the parking lot, it is less than 30 seconds. I mean, ideal spot. So
this is, so I guess right now would be a good time to go into the numbers, right? In terms of the scorecard, just to get the hard data. But this is just fascinating. Yeah.
All right, so let's just jump to where we are right now. So this will bring you full circle. So when we record this, it's I'm looking at data from the week of June 27th, 2021. So to remember, the micro studio launched in October. It got closed down basically right away after a couple of weeks for a month, and then it relaunched in December. So we have some of December, January, February, March, April, May, June, and then a few weeks before that initial shutdown. So a little over 7 months. But I'm going to give you the matched pair design. I'm going to give you the St. Louis Park location. So similar, it opened the exact same time period, couple weeks apart. They're located 10 minutes from each other. That's our normal studio. That's 2,000 square feet. It's the exact build out of what all of our franchise locations will look like. It's the exact equipment package of our franchise location. So it's the majority of it is MedX, teeny bit of hammer strength, teeny bit of Nautilus. It's everything we'll do with every franchise going forward. Okay. That's not a franchise location. It's just the model. It's when people come into town, we show them that, and it's right below our corporate office. Our corporate office is upstairs. So the week of June 27th, we did, I'll go St. Louis Park first. We did 331 sessions at the St. Louis Park location. So our scorecard item is we're shooting for 275. We did 331. That studio has been open for 7 months. And the Edina studio did 31 sessions. And now let me just go back in some data points here. Edina did 31 that week, 25 the week before, 29 the week before, 22 the week before, 26 the week before, 26 the week before that, 30. So it has stayed consistent basically since it launched. It has not moved at all. Everything we've tried from a marketing standpoint, from a changing staff standpoint, from a communication standpoint. When I say communication, I mean changing it from micro to Edina, 20 minutes to 30 minutes. Nothing has moved the needle. Now, in the meantime, all of our studios have grown massively. I just shared the St. Louis Park because that's a match pair, right? They were both brand new, and I thought that was the best data point to share.
Yeah, this is baffling, isn't it? All right, so gone into some of the results.
I mean, Lawrence, the magnitude of the difference in number, if you looked at our micro studio, it's not too many, fewer pieces of equipment. I mean, it is than St. Louis Park. When you look at those numbers, I would look at it and say, I don't know if high intensity training, strength training business works, right? And when you look at the St. Louis Park locations, you say this is the fastest growing fitness concept in the world. I mean, I will say in 7 months, I don't think there's ever been a fitness concept that's grown revenue in 7 months like that location has. And that's not an arrogant statement, because I literally am the one that just said we launched maybe the least successful fitness concept of all time at the exact same time. So when we did our scorecard review every single week, we felt really good about ourselves and really poorly about ourselves at the same time.
I mean, maybe one of the takeaways at the end of all this is something Dave would probably say is stop trying to figure it out. Stop trying to figure out why it didn't work and just move on and realize that sometimes you'll never be able to figure out why something doesn't work. But I can't help but keep coming back to why didn't this work? I mean, like you made all the necessary changes. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is had the clientele already been exposed to marketing around micro and 20 minutes, so they'd already kind of associated it with being less than.
So we could not change the mindset once the customer is already there?
Maybe, yeah. Oh, that's that place they talked about before, which is less than, I don't know.
No, potentially, but Lawrence, just think about this. We're communicating in all ways that it's a 30-minute Discover Strength workout. Like, we're literally showing videos. We never show a video of me working out, but we showed a video of David training me in the micro studio.
That's a great video, that.
Well, thank you. To say that, like, hey, Luke works out here, right? Like, this is not an afterthought. This is not a lesser version of a Discover Strength studio. Like, I plan my workouts there because I want to train there because I think it's a great location. So we tried to message, and that was just one example of trying to say that, hey, I'm even into it. So I thought we message it pretty clear, and it's not a hard message to understand. It's a 30-minute workout. There's machines there. Like, we constantly explain that. When we said micro, we said this is not like a virtual workout in a small studio. This is like equipment. All the equipment that you're used to is here. So we tried to include images of the equipment so people understood what it actually looked like. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I just think that would be a leap. I would trying to connect the dots that really shouldn't be connected.
Because I was about to say then, oh, hang on a sec. Maybe it's because the clients that weren't interested in virtual coming to studio weren't going to do anything. But then that doesn't explain the growth at St. Louis Park, does it?
No. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So St. Louis Park was massive amounts of brand new clients. Massive amount of clients switching from other studios to St. Louis Park, which is good. The rest of our studios still grew overall. So all of our, across, all 7 locations, we continue to grow. So let's be clear. We did not struggle through the last few months, kind of post-pandemic. We just finished up as we record this. We're just wrapping up Q2. We had the best quarter in company history. Last week was the best week in company history. In the first 26 weeks of 2021, honestly, about 19 of them have been the best week in company history. We keep re-breaking our best ever. We are growing like we have never grown before. We're averaging more introductory workouts in a week than we have ever at any time in company history. Side note, Hannah, our VP of marketing, is on maternity leave. Maybe that has something to do with it. We told her she'd have babies more often because everything we're doing right now is working. So
she loves that.
Yeah, and I took her through a workout yesterday. I trained her yesterday. So the only time I see her is when I train her now. And she's doing great. And I say, hey, you just stay home, take care of your baby. Things are going fine. But the reason
that's a quick back to the studio. Good for her.
Yeah. She's had 2 workouts back so far and just had great workouts. So the reason I share that is this is fascinating, because in a time period where things are going so well and we almost could have the arrogance of everything we touch, it works, it's turning to gold. And then we're reminded, no, the micro is not working at all. And I shouldn't call it micro anymore, because now we call it Edina, but Edina is not working. So let me maybe bring this full circle. We're recording this at the very end of June. Our lease there is up the end of August. So now we have a choice. Do we extend that lease for a full year? Do we go month to month and kind of see what happens? Because basically by paying for the lease month to month, it's almost like we're paying for a storage space for this equipment. Because if we closed it down, we'd still have to move that equipment somewhere and pay to have it stored somewhere. So we have a decision to make in the next couple of months. I was at my quarterly offsite meeting with a leadership team and with a traction implementer that we use, the implementer we've used for many, many, many years, Greg. He said, well, should we talk about the micro studio, Edina? It's not doing very well. Isn't this one of your strategic issues that you should be thinking about? And we all said, we're not really concerned. He said, what do you mean you're not concerned? Mike, it's not losing. It's a perfect rifle shot. We're not losing money off of it. It's just, we're going to make a decision, and it's not going to tip, it's not going to tip our performance of the entire company either way. So it from that standpoint was a great example of a rifle shot. And let me get to kind of my take home message on the rifle shot later. So we do not know what we're going to do with micro right now. Are we going to shut it down? Will we keep it open? I probably should say this. Jessica, our VP of Finance, is quick to point out that it's still profitable. I mean, we are not losing money on it. 30 sessions a week off of this tiny space. It is paying for itself. But sometimes you say that it's profitable and it's misleading. So we say, great, profitable. It's making $9, a month or something like that. So it's not losing money, right. But it's the phrase that we use way too often is the juice worth the squeeze? And in this case, I would say the juice is not worth the squeeze. We have trainers driving there, and we're trying to figure out how to keep it clean, keep the equipment in repair, and all of it. Is the juice worth the squeeze? There's so many other ways we can drive profit than maybe that Edina studio. And by the way, as we discussed this, Lawrence, I'm incredibly excited when you're ready for me to get to my major takeaway out of all of this. What I think the major learning is, and Dave Smith may disagree with it, but here's where my learning is out of this, and my leadership teams is eventually when you're ready for that.
Well, no, go straight to it. It makes sense.
Yeah. So it's this: the customer, and when I say the customer, I mean our target market, doesn't want a small studio with less equipment. They want more equipment. They want a more beautiful build out, and they want the full, Discover Strength experience. Now, there's a second part to that. What's interesting about this, hopefully for your listeners, is every high intensity training practitioner I've ever met, maybe with the exception of like Mike Petrella, thinks that they should start with less equipment in a smaller space and lower overhead, so that there's less to risk. And that decision right there is probably the reason that they haven't grown. So the desire to minimize risk, the desire to play small is the main reason that we haven't seen high intensity training studios grow. Now that sounds like I just made a big leap right there, but in the last 8 months, we have run apparently the ultimate case study. We hired the most expensive interior designers in the health club space in the world. Fabiano designed that studio. Every Medix machine in there, everything is brand new. I mean, it is an unbelievably designed studio. All the equipment you could imagine. I mean, it's not Mike Petrella. It's not all the equipment that you could imagine.
Let me just jump in. You're about to say, okay. So I was going to say, is the interior design of a Edina, is it way less impressive than your other places?
Way less impressive. Yeah. Way less impressive. I mean, the floor is not as interesting. The paint job, the wall coverings, the ceiling, the architecture, none of it's the same. And the high intensity training practitioners never think about this. I shouldn't say never, but rarely think about this. But every other boutique studio concept from yoga to bar to boot camp to spinning, all they think about is the build out and the design and the architecture, and it really matters. And so I think, I'm just short of saying I am convinced that the studio design, the interior design drives business. And I think that's a huge area that high intensity training practitioners have missed out on. I'm excited about the fact that they've missed out on it because I think we're the only ones that are really doing it. Not that you couldn't copy us very easily, but what we've traditionally done is said equipment's important. I'm going to spend money on equipment. The design is not important. I'm going to put the studio anywhere. And I think that could be a massive business mistake.
Wow. This is really interesting. So a couple of things I just wanted to mention is, so it sounds like, you've spoken before about designing the business around the target market, and your target market, psychographics, would suggest to me that they really care about beauty and luxury and, that kind of design inside of the studio. I know we're making assumptions here, but maybe that's part of it potentially. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, it's funny because, I've said it multiple times on this podcast with you and maybe with other guests about, you don't need much to start a high intensity training business. You need a few machines and a small space and it's low overhead. And maybe there is an issue with that related to what you're saying here. And it makes me feel quite grateful that our studio here in Ireland, in Galway, is as you've seen, it's pretty cavernous. It's almost got, I don't know if it's not, a fancy luxury design, but it's got I don't know, it's got like an interesting feel to it. I don't feel like it's going to send the wrong message, I guess is what I'm saying. I mean, we're obviously a very young business. We don't have a target market properly defined and all of that, and we will. But we also have 1,400 square feet. So we have enough space for a lot of equipment, which we do intend to acquire over time as we cash flow better. And so I don't feel like that's going to be a problem for us, if indeed that's true, right? But obviously there are a lot of studio owners out there who are operating in similar conditions to your studio in Edina, or those that are planning startups that's similar to that. Now, just to be clear, I guess you can't be 100% confident that's the case, right? And there's I'm sure there are counterexamples, right? There are small studios out there who are probably doing very well with less equipment and small square footage. So,
Lawrence, I would disagree. Yeah. I don't think there is no small studio that's doing the numbers that I just said.
Okay,
in those Park studio. So let's be very clear. You can do a small studio with very little equipment and have a great life and have a great business and a business to be proud of. We have never seen it done where you can have a small studio in an undesirable space with not very much equipment and grow to the size that I think we're talking about. So, and I didn't say one of those is right or wrong, but I think this is like probably the theme that I keep coming back to on your podcast, is we have dramatically underestimated the upside potential of a high intensity training business because we continue to make tactical decisions that force us to stay small rather than to actually grow. So the mindset is $150,000 to $250,000 in revenue is exceptionally large. And the reality is, no. $1 million is so doable. $1.5 million in 1,600 square feet is very doable. But we have to change what we think about the basic tenets of that studio are. And we have had as a community, as a group of high intensity training practitioners, we've had no interest in that. We have no interest in changing what we learned 25 years ago or 35 years ago from some wonderful mentors where we probably got it wrong. So again, Dave Smith may reject a lot of what I said there, but that's where my thinking is right now. And I did not think this 8 years ago. I thought it was about the equipment. I thought it was about the quality of the workout, and that's it. Which, by the way, I still think that's most of it. But I think that it's a combination of having enough equipment in a desirable location, an attractive enough studio, and you're going to grow. And you said that our target market, it probably resonates with our target market. I think 98% of your listeners, it resonates with that. And our target markets are pretty darn similar. Your clients, all of your listeners' clients, like to eat in nice restaurants, and they like to go to a nice spa or salon and get their hair cut, right? They don't want to strength train in a facility that is.
What about like a CrossFit, right? A CrossFit, which is like, renowned for being minimalist and grimy and dusty and just barbells lying around. And that attracted quite an affluent target market. And obviously they've got other attributes like the community aspect. Yeah. But that's what do you think of that? Yeah.
I don't think it attracted the affluence of all of your listener studios. I think different level of affluence.
It's expensive though. CrossFit was expensive.
Decently expensive. I mean, not as expensive as a high intensity training studio, but more expensive than a normal health club. And normal health club is often built to be pretty beautiful. So I do think that they did a wonderful job of that. But CrossFit understood, how does it all piece together? So the style of training, the look and feel and design and the aesthetic of the studio, how the coach was going to talk to you, the music, all of it went together and it was symbiotic, right? It worked. I mean, it's how you create a brand. And I think we haven't necessarily done that. And when I say we, I mean high intensity training practitioners. I think the consumer maybe doesn't believe you when you say this is the most sophisticated, cutting edge strength training machine and scientific approach ever. By the way, we're in a very, unattractive physical space. The consumer is not saying, but wait, the space is not attractive. It just somehow subconsciously they're saying, I don't believe you. I don't believe that this could be cutting edge. And I look around, it feels nothing like cutting edge. Where CrossFit never said we're cutting edge. CrossFit said something else. We are athletes. We are competitive. We are intense. We are, I don't know what they said, but they said things along those lines, I think.
So just to kind of start wrapping this one up then, it's fascinating. This is definitely one of the most interesting podcasts we've done together, I think, and just a really good lesson for everyone. But do you think, so for you, I mean, the type of person you are, Luke, were you really intent of trying to understand exactly why this didn't work, right? Or have you kind of accepted that that's just kind of a hypothesis and you don't truly know? I'm just curious how you think about it.
My first thought was, how do we get it right? How do we improve it? So we're going to grow this thing. We're going to make Edina, we're going to make micro work. We are going to grow this. And I let go of that pretty quickly because, well, no, it was a rifle shot. It wasn't Luke, find a way to make it work to show that you weren't wrong. It was learn something from it so that you can continue to grow the rest of the business. And that's what we went into it, at the beginning with. I don't like to quit on things. And Seth Godin talks about you need to know when to quit and back out on things. I'm just not wired that way. So I had to remind myself going into this, no, you started this to decide whether or not it was worth continuing or not. So you learned that this is not worth continuing. And it would be one thing, Lawrence, if that studio, the micro studio didn't work, but it was a combination of the micro wasn't working and all of our other studios, the other brand new studio with the full build out and all the new medics, et cetera, worked so incredibly well. So it wasn't just one studio's failing, it's every other studio was working so incredibly well. So that was kind of the chief learning there. Now, let me add, what I think is interesting over the last 7 months, I haven't had a single friend, hit colleague, studio owner, anyone call me and ask me about our new St. Louis Park location and how it's going, okay? They all ask me about the micro. And literally, I've got so many messages of congratulations for the micro. Congratulations, great work. I love that idea. Really, really smart that you guys are on top of that. I'd love to learn more about that. Hey, can we set up a call and talk about that? I'd like to do that. And my response, and I never say this out loud, is you do not want to do this. What you want to do is you want to do like we did in our St. Louis Park location, our franchise model. So it's fascinating that and I don't think I've been deceitful about the success of Edina, that everyone's interested in it, and it has not been successful at all. But that's what everyone's actually been interested in, which again, to me, I'm making a leap here. It shows that there's something ingrained in the HIIT community and entrepreneurs in general that we want to play small and minimize risk. And minimizing risk is really smart. We should minimize risk at every turn, but you can't minimize risk in a way that completely negates any upside potential. And the upside potential is just massive. And I think we've stymied that upside potential with some of these risk mitigation tactics.
I think this has turned into a very inspiring podcast because I think especially if people have listened to obviously previous appearances you made on the show in relation to what you've been able to achieve in revenue in your business, through virtual and studio is incredible. And hopefully it gives people a little bit more confidence in the idea of going larger, maybe. There's a few things I want to talk about just to wrap this one up. I know you've got a hard stop at 10 past, haven't you? Your
Yes.
side. It's funny you should mention what you just said there about people calling you saying congratulations. It sounds like there's a lot of confirmation bias, right? They're looking for that reinforcement. But I had people contact me and said, isn't Luke doing, and I mean this like complimentary, like, isn't Luke doing what we've all been doing, which you are, right? You would agree with that, in terms of running this. A lot of our colleagues run small studios, right? And they're saying, oh, he's just doing what we've been doing for years, right? That was a running joke. And obviously I didn't mean it in that way, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
And,
so hold on. That's a great point. And I didn't know that was a running joke that existed, but yeah, I mean, basically,
I say a running joke. It was like one comment, Luke. So I don't think we're all like, we're all talking behind your back.
But that's a fair point. It's one client, one trainer in the studio. And that's literally what the business model has been. Like, I have plenty of colleagues and people that listen to your show and have been on your show that they won't put another trainer in the facility at once. It's only one trainer at a time. So what we're doing was not novel at all. It was just totally different for us because we normally have 6 trainers on the floor at one time.
I have a counterexample. Now I have to say the name because otherwise it won't make sense and you won't believe me, right? What about Skylar Tanner with Smart Strength? He was doing 200 sessions. I want to say 100 to 200. No, I'm exaggerating that. He was doing a lot of sessions. So, and he's got a small studio, limited equipment. So there's a counterexample.
Well, I could text message him right now. I don't think he's ever done 200 sessions. But if he
200
has,
is hyperbole. But go on, sorry.
I apologize, Skylar. Congratulations if you are doing that many. I don't think we should comment unless we know what the sessions are. And I should say this: Skylar's awesome at what he does, and Skylar has a tremendous amount of experience. Skylar is, I just think Skylar's brilliant and does a wonderful job. He's also moved to a larger studio.
He has now, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think he definitely had more equipment than our micro studio did. So
possibly.
I don't know where you were going with that, but I don't think he could possibly do 200 because I don't think he generally had more than one other trainer, and there's no way that 2 of them were each training 100.
Yeah, you're right. This is me trying to prove you wrong now, and I probably exaggerated that. So it was probably more closer to. Yeah, no, I know it was around 100. I know because he was sending me screenshots of his calendar way back, and I'm pretty sure it was over 100. So that's decent. But anyway, he won't mind us talking about this, and maybe he'll respond. And this is one of the things I was going to say, actually, is I want to invite people to respond to this in the comments. I don't know, probably comments would make the most sense, right? In terms of if they have got any examples that do run counter to this, because it will help us understand this better. Maybe Luke's totally right, but I'm just curious if there's anyone out there who has a counter example. One of the things I was also going to say is, the one of the big takeaways from me, and I think for the audience for this episode, is the value of the rifle shot, right? So really capping the downside. Because what would have happened, and you're in a position right now where you've not put too much resource into this, you can let it go and it doesn't have a big impact. And that's partly because you don't have a huge sunk cost, right? Like if you hadn't done a rifle shot, like most organizations in the way they operate, they would have just gone, oh, that's a good idea. Let's go and put a load of money into it. You see that all the time, right? And then when it doesn't work, they just keep pushing it anyway because of the sunk cost fallacy, right? Because they've put all that resource into it and they can't face losing all of that. So that's sort of a reinforcement of the value of the rifle shot. And also the other thing I wanted to highlight here is, listen to Luke describe the scorecard. He knows the exact numbers across all locations. He could not have understood the performance of that location unless he measured the workouts, the different metrics that you measure at that location. So again, it's just really important to highlight these things because they.
Let me make a quick comments on that. The first one is not as important as I think the second one will be. The first one is, this was only a rifle shot because of where we are in the business. To buy 16 Nautilus machines and open up a studio 14 years ago for us, that would not have been a rifle shot. That would have been every penny we ever had it would have sunk us to spend that much money, right? At the place we are right now, we were able to do it. So rifle shot is relative, right? I mean, our entire business would be considered a rifle shot for a business that's, a $1 billion business or a business that's bigger than us. I mean, they would spend that money in an hour and say, big deal. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So rifle shot is relative to the size of your organization at the time. Now, the other thing I would say is, I love your comment that you want some feedback from listeners of where they have exceptions to this. But the limitation of that is they don't have a match pair design. So you will have listeners that have one studio that's small, that's doing very, very well. But what I'm introducing on the podcast, or what we're trying to talk about, is we have a match pair design where the same brand with the same uniques and the same strategic niche and the same marketing with the same customers in the same time period launched a studio, 10 minutes from each other, two studios 10 minutes from each other. And one did this, grew rapidly, and one was, I guess we could say an abysmal failure, or just shy of an abysmal failure. That's what I think is different. So an anecdotal studio that's small, that's done well, that's interesting, but it's just a different conversation. Does that make sense?
It does, but it does make sense. I think your study of your own studios makes sense in the context of Minneapolis and the business there. But then you can't make the claim to say that someone can't drive, a lot more revenue 3 to 4 times what you've done at eDiner with that example, if there's counter examples. That's my thinking.
But what I'm saying is the anecdotes you're going to get is someone that's operated a studio for 10 years, that's small, and they're doing pretty well. Okay. Well, great. That doesn't compare to what we've talked about. What I would want to see is in their market, if they launched a small studio, let's even call small 900 square feet versus the 2,000 square feet at the exact same time.
Got it.
Perform better. And
so you're saying they should just do the 2,000 square feet and not even bother?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't think that it's one of the confirmation biases is you don't know because you didn't launch something else in your same market at the same time, the same external environment, et cetera. So you're thinking, I made the right choice. This is going well. It actually could be going very poorly relative to what you could have done. The opportunity cost, what you missed out on, is massive. And that's why I think what we did not do it for this reason. We did it because we were trying to survive and make money. Is interesting. That's why this experiment, it wasn't supposed to be an experiment, but an experiment became pretty interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense to me now. I appreciate you explaining that. So what would you have liked to see at that studio, just out of interest? What were you hoping to see in terms of session numbers?
I thought we'd get to 100 sessions in a week, no problem, instantaneously. I thought every slot would be available or would be booked from 5:30 a.m. until 8 p.m. And then Saturday and Sunday would be packed. My bets were, we're going to get to 150 sessions a week in no time, which is very profitable because that's a small space with, very little overhead.
Luke, thanks so much for doing this again. Thank you for that. I really enjoyed this discussion. Any final thoughts and also contact information as usual?
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for producing the great content you produce. You know this. When I wake up Wednesday morning in the US, I look for an episode right away. And if the episode hasn't dropped, I panic. I usually message you. So thanks for putting out the great content that you put out. If anyone has questions or wants to get in touch, it's Luke@discoverstrength.com, and our website's discoverstrength.com. And I should also put in a plug that we have a resistance exercise conference coming up in Las Vegas in October, and a tremendous amount of registrations, all of your HIT colleagues and friends, and should be a great time to kind of not only learn, but to come back together in person for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely be there this year, but I can't, only because we're having a second baby in October, as you know. And that's the announcement, which I think this is probably the first time I've announced that potentially. So I would be there otherwise, because I love Rec. And obviously I've been there the last 2018, 2019, and I was there for the virtual one last year. And we'll definitely be at all the future events. Highly recommend it. So I encourage listeners to go and sign up for that over at resistanceexerciseconference.com. And you also want to mention a franchise opportunity quickly as well.
Yeah, so we have a discoverstrengthfranchise.com, and they can check that out also, learn more about that.
Great. And to find the blog post for this episode and download free resources to help you grow your strength studio, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 323. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.